Cassian Vorn served as Lord Commander of the Salamanders Legion during the Wars of Unification, Great Crusade, and Horus Heresy. Leading the 18th Legion prior to their reunion of their Primarch, Vulcan, Vorn would lead his legion in their first major engagement of the Great Crusade. The assault of the Tempest Galleries would be the first storied victory for the then Dragon Warriors, in their combat which would diminish their number from 20,000 Astartes to 1,000 survivors. Thereon deployed as support for larger legions, the 18th would, despite their losses, earn glory in 100 war zones across the stars. Destroying space hulks or corsair raids behind the advance of the Great Crusade's expanse, the 18th would foster bonds of camaraderie amongst Imperial Army regiments and be renowned for their empathy while commanded by Vorn. Garnering a reputation as the saviors of mortal men, the Dragon Warriors would gain veterancy, fighting untold varieties of foes for decades of bloody warfare. Yet during the Legion's most dire of battles, their Primarch would aid them in their hour of need. Defending the cluster of colony worlds of the Taras Division, the Dragon Warriors would be beset by a horde of the Orc Xenos. Having replenished their numbers to 19,000 Astartes during their decades of war, the 18th would marshal the defences of the system and engage the Greenskins for a solar year of void warfare and ground battles. Evacuating the populations of 3 of the worlds of the Taras system, the 18th would suffer heavy losses for their valour. Cassian Vorn would be fatally wounded during one such battle upon the world of Antaeum. Seemingly fated to die upon the Death World, the Dragon Warriors would be saved by their Primarch at the head of his army of 3,000 Nocturnian Astartes. Alike to a hammer blow, Vulcan's forces would shatter the largest of the Orc space hulks in orbit. Reinvigorated at the sight of the fall of the great abomination of the stars, the Dragon Warriors upon Antaeum would hurl themselves at the Orc menace with renewed fury. Scattering the Xenos, the 2 forces of the 18th would purge the world of the Orcs and meet upon the now cleansed Coral Plains. Kneeling before their Genesire, they would be bade to rise, and the Lord of Drakes would kneel before his long orphaned to honour their sacrifice. Vorn would be relieved of his command of the Legion and be interred within a dreadnought sarcophagus. Vulcan, a master of artifice, would build the Dracos Revenant, a unique pattern of dreadnought armour befitting the honoured hero of his Terran Astartes. A wonder of craftsmanship, Vorn would be revived within his nigh impenetrable armoured shell and never falter in his will to face the enemies of his Imperium among his newly renamed Salamanders Legion. However, as years ebbed and waned, the newly named Dracos would begin to lose mental acuity outside of the fires of battle. Slumbering for ever-extended periods of time, Dracos would be awoken for only the gravest of battles, and none would be more dire than the treacherous battle of Istvan V. The traitorous architects of the Dropside Massacre of Istvan V would annihilate the Salamanders Legion. Vulcan would perish, and with him, untold thousands of both Terran and Nocturne Salamanders would be felled with the blades and bolters of the War Master's rebellion. Dracos would take to the field and face the traitors with unmatched ferocity. Spearheading the counterattack against overwhelming odds, Cassian would witness the overwhelming slaughter of his battle brothers. Despite the peerless craft of his armor's durability, breaches and damage would penetrate its dense alloys. Destroying any in his path, Dracos would leave hundreds of traitor corpses in his wake, until an orbital strike would halt the remaining flame of the Loyalist Defiance. Yet Dracos would not perish, and after a solar year of hibernation and the recovery of his dreadnought by the Shattered Legion crew of the void ship Ebon Drake, Dracos would face the traitors once more. Losing every limb of his warsuit, the Dracos Revenant would be outfitted with new armaments to further bring retribution to the War Master's forces. Informing the Shattered Legionaries that Vulcan had somehow arisen from the brink of death, remarking,
"You come seeking our father, but he is not here. I searched for him on the field of battle, until they struck me down with a sword of flame that scorched the very heavens. And yet, I did not die. I searched for him in the endless vaults of the dead, where the crushing blackness tore at my very soul. And yet, I endured. I was tested once again through the crucible, and I tell you this: Vulcan does not walk among the dead.
Leading the remnant Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and Salamanders of the Ebon Drake Black Shield Warband, the Disciples of Flame, Drakos would refuse to slumber so long as the War Master's forces still drew breath. Tormented by the memories of his past battles, Drakos would be referred to as the Twice Dead by his men, the Salamanders under his charge, scorching parts of their armor black to honor their venerable leader's dormancy upon the ashes of Istvan V. Traversing to Nocturne, the Ebon Drake would translate to the Mazoan system en route and be beset by the Iron Warriors and Alpha Legion. The specters of their former legion's glories would descend upon the traitor fleet. Unable to match the superior firepower of two legions, the Ebon Drake would retreat to the surface of the Forge World of Mazoa. Meeting with the Magos rulers of the planet, Drakos would exude a near supernatural affinity with his mechanically augmented allies, and the denizens of the Forge World would recognize Drakos as the living avatar of the Omnissiah. Within the depths of Mazoa, Cassian's dreadnought would be restored to its former glory as his men staved off the invaders. The third siege of Mazoa would rage for 9 solar days until the Iron Warriors' 114th Grand Battalion would breach the Forge Vein. Led by the Alpha Legion Consul Legatus, Ortilan Skor, the Hydra's headsman would slay a member of the Norn Queens, yet be repelled by the valiant souls of the Solar Auxilia 891st Lethe cohort. In their darkest hour, Drakos would return to the battlefield and face the Iron Warriors. Draco's unknown influence of mechanicals would influence the enemy battle automata with binaric mania and override their coding to join the Loyalist ranks. Claiming 1,000 automata to the fold, the Iron Dragon of Terror would lead his now bolstered forces to face the Iron Warriors' commander, Narik Draga. The 4th Legion would cower within their fortresses, bracing for an assault, yet Drakos would not fire upon the Iron Warriors. Alone, Cassian would meet with Draga and convince the Warsmith to ally with him to bring retribution against Ortilan Skor. Used as pawns by the Kingkiller during the siege, Narik would revel for the chance to bring vengeance against the Hydra. Ceasing hostilities against the Forge World, the Iron Warriors, Disciples of the Flame, and Mechanicum forces would rout the Alpha Legion. Ortilan and Skor would escape the battle, yet the Twice Dead had now recruited the renegade Iron Warriors to his cause and would install Narik as his senior lieutenant. The record of the Revenant Dragon, hereon, remains a mystery, yet what is known is that the Disciples of the Flame would further harry the traitors to the throne. Drakos would presumably perish upon an unknown battle on an unrecorded world, yet his dreadnought sarcophagus would be returned to the Salamanders. Interring the most venerated fallen of the chapter within the Drakos Revenant, those whom survive its activation earn glory for the Salamanders alike to the legacy of the Twice Dead. Currently housing Brayoff Ashmantle, the former captain of the Salamander's 4th Company, charges into battle as the reborn Iron Dragon and brings vengeance to the foes of his Imperium.